Okay, so any declaration of conflict of interest or general nature thereof? Not seeing any. And just quickly, has everyone had a chance to look at the previous month's minutes? Yep. Any changes? No. Okay, so can I get a motion to adopt those minutes? Bonnie, it's you, seconded by Emily. All in favor? That is passed. And now I will turn it over. We have two guests, it looks like, from Buchanan and Hall. I know that I have the Jeff Hunters here from the Ontario Geothermal Association, Rose Anderson, Buchanan and Hall, to talk about the geothermal topic, building on last month's meeting. But I also see we have a second person, I think from Rose Buchanan from Buchanan and Hall. So welcome to you both. My name's Emily. I'm the chair of the Energy and Environment Committee. And I will turn the meeting over to you, the both of you, for your presentation. Sound good?
Sure, sounds good. Thanks for the invite. I thought maybe the best plan here to start out was, because I'm not sure of the landscape and everyone's familiarity with geothermal. So I thought we'd just do a quick presentation, only a few minutes, to talk to you about what it is, a little bit of the basics, and then cover off a little bit of the discussion. I think that the note that we kind of got was about community development with geothermal. So I think we'll just do that and then go into Q&A and go from there. Okay. Now I can probably just hit share my screen, right?
Yes, it should be on, Jeff, for you.
Okay. Microsoft PowerPoint, is that going to screw me up? So let's see here. I'm just going to move over to one. I've got two monitors here, so I'm going to go like that. Okay. Slideshow, play from the start. Okay, yeah, so I'm with the OGA, and obviously Rose is here from local Buchanan and Hall, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. Rose is an OGA member company, so we're happy to be here to talk to you about geothermal. OGA has been around since, I think it's 2007, 2006-ish, and a lot of our role is to work with varying organizations, different levels of government, to advocate, educate, inform as many people as we can about geothermal heat pump systems. And just to quickly go into what it is, I mean, geothermal really is utilizing solar energy. The Earth is the world's largest solar panel, and absorbing nearly 50% of all the solar energy that comes in from the sun is absorbed by the top surface layer of the Earth. And so when we're talking about geothermal energy, we're not talking about Iceland and high temperature geysers, although there is that type of geothermal being developed now in power generation and those types of things, and high temperature resources. We're talking about low temperature, low grade geothermal heat that we access just below the surface of the Earth. And we're able to do that because just below the frost line, the temperature of the Earth maintains relatively constant throughout the year. And that's advantageous to us when we're thinking about heating our homes and heating our buildings. When it's minus 20, minus 30 degrees outside, we can expect that below that frost line, we're going to get about 10, 15 degrees Celsius constant all year. So conversely, in the summertime, when we're trying to cool our buildings, we're actually essentially just trying to move heat from inside our houses and store it in the ground in a lower temperature resource. So geothermal and geothermal heat pumps is really all about moving heat from a source to a sink and vice versa very, very efficiently. And this is a typical configuration of what it might look like, because our system is comprised of a couple of main components. In the basement of your house, it's not too unusual. Most people have furnaces of some type in their home. And essentially a geothermal heat pump replaces that furnace. It's a box that connects into either your ductwork, or if you have radiators, a radiant system. And that's how we're able to deliver both heating and cooling. And that heat pump that's in the house then connects into a ground loop, which is a series of high density.
Jeff, your presentation isn't changing.
Uh-oh. What page are you looking at?
Well, we're looking at the your slides, but it's not in slideshow mode.
Did it just change?
No.
No.
Maybe you have to reshare again.
Why don't I
Or if
do
you have a
that?
split monitor.
Yeah, did you go to a different screen? Yeah.
So can you see the difference now? The change?
No.
Uh-oh. Oh, you're on that screen because I moved the.
Uh,
Oh, okay. I got you. How do I do that? I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do this quickly.
Bonnie, I didn't even clue in. I was just like, oh yeah, okay, going through this, trying
Well, I'm
to.
thinking he's talking about this, and I'm thinking, well, I think
What
it's next screen down. That,
can you? What do you see now?
same thing.
Same thing. Okay, let's do this.
well, you've changed the page, but it's showing the
Right.
whole slideshow instead of the actual screen.
Yeah, we see your slides on the side as well.
Oh, you do? Okay, so you see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
There, thank
There.
you.
Got it? And does it change? Different slide? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Perfect. You don't know how many times that's happened to me, and the multiple monitors just makes it more complicated. But okay, so yeah, this is typical pipes, heat pump in the building, and it's very efficient. The ground loop allows us to be very, very efficient because of those constant stable temperatures. We're able to drive efficiencies of 300 to 500%. So it's a very, and the energy that we're getting from the ground is a renewable source. That thermal energy will always be there for us to extract. And so we design a piping loop based on the energy requirement of the home. So after understanding how much energy do we need to put into the home in the wintertime for heat, and how much do we need to take out in the summertime to make sure you stay cool, we're able to figure out how much piping that we need to put in the ground. And that can happen in various different configurations depending on the application. Now, single family homes are of a couple of configurations. In urban areas or suburban areas where there's not as much room, we need to drill down vertically and boreholes. They're called boreholes, just like water wells that you're probably familiar with. To get water, these are closed boreholes where we put the pipe in and seal it up and connect all those pipes together. In cottage country or communities with lakes or ponds, we can utilize surface water resources like this and essentially put piping into the lake or the pond and sink it to the bottom and use that lake or pond as our thermal resource. It's very efficient to transfer energy to and from a water source. And then there's the horizontal application that we looked at before, and this is very typical in rural areas outside of Stratford. This is exactly what Buchanan and Hall would be doing a lot of, is when you have some acreage and some room, we can install those systems horizontally. Now, commercially, I mean, geothermal is very popular right now, I'll tell you, in the Greater Toronto area, and I've done a number of projects there with larger buildings because the economies of scale in a commercial building have allowed for utility type models to come in and offer geothermal solutions to, let's say, condo corporations, right? Where they'll come in and they'll drill these vertical loops and they'll capitalize it and then lease that out to the condo corporation, which then, you know, they pay a monthly lease agreement for the utilization of that energy. And similar to what, when I was speaking with Casey, I believe on the emails when they got in touch with us, was in regards to the Markham and Mattamy project. And I guess you can call that a networked geothermal application, where what they're trying to do is essentially they're replicating a application that was done in Arizona a couple of years ago, which I think they have a couple hundred homes already connected, and there's 300 more coming on next year and the year after that. It's called Whisper Valley if you wanted to look it up. But essentially, they've done a networked geothermal system where each of the homes has their own heat pump, and then they connect in, and there's a mash of piping in here, but each of the homes would connect into a central geothermal distribution loop, whereby there are boreholes drilled in the rights of way of the street, and they all connect together to serve as one giant loop, essentially, just to serve the community. I'm going to call that networked because it's a little bit different than if you've heard the term district heating. A district heating system kind of assumes that there is a central controller or a central plant that is also connected to this loop that acts as like a master control. And what it would do, and there's many different types of district heating systems. If you look around, there's around the world, there's different systems. There's low carbon district heating systems that don't utilize fossil fuel, and geothermal is certainly a technology that's capable of connecting into a low carbon district heating system. But then there's also typical or previous typical district heating with boilers and chillers and cooling towers and fossil fuel systems to fire up and provide that energy to that district loop, so you have heating and cooling in a district setup. So there's different ways of looking at those larger scale systems. And then also in more recently, we've been seeing a lot more applications in wastewater heat recovery. So sewage heat recovery systems, wastewater treatment plants, larger buildings with more predictable waste loads. You can extract, there's a lot of heat in poop, so might as well use that where you can. And so it's essentially with geothermal is heat pump technology. Where can we get energy from, and sources and sinks? What sources and sinks can we add together to the benefit of the community? And really, in a district or micro district or networked system, that's really advantageous when you have diversity of loads, where you can perhaps optimize the economics of a geothermal system by reducing the amount of boreholes that you have to put in, but feeding in other sources, right? So if you say, one example is like an ice rink. So say you had a community of homes, and in the center of the homes, you had an ice rink. Well, that ice rink throughout the year, you're always trying to essentially suck heat out of the surface of the ice. Well, in a typical arena, there are what they call cooling towers or evaporative cooling devices that essentially, you'll see it on the side of the arena. It's just a fan. It's kind of like a bucket of water and a fan over a coil, and you're just rejecting all that heat to the atmosphere. While in a low carbon system, such as a geothermal district system, you'd want to try and utilize that heat. So you would take that heat from the surface of the ice and dump it into your district geothermal system, so that the homes that are connected can use that. And if you have that opportunity, that can help the economics, because now you can look at cutting down the infrastructure required, the geothermal boreholes, right? So the least amount of boreholes that you need, the better the cost effectiveness, right? But one of the challenges that comes in there when you're looking at larger scale applications is balance of loads. In every application, whether it's a home or a larger building, the goal is to balance as much as possible or account for imbalance. And what I mean by that is our houses a lot of the time require a lot more heat energy throughout the year than they do cooling, right? Because we're a colder climate, it takes more energy to heat our buildings in the wintertime than it does to cool them in the summertime. So if you looked at the end of the year, you'll probably have what they call unbalanced loads, more heating required than cooling. And on a geothermal system that's utilizing the ground for storage of thermal energy, it's seasonal. It's like a battery. If we want to put in as much heat as we take out, we want to put in to keep that balanced for the long term. And so those are considerations when you're looking at larger applications with diversity of loads. In residential single family applications, single loop, we account for that in the design of the piping system that we put in, so that we know over the course of 30, 50, 100 years, there's going to be enough energy in that loop to provide that house with heating and cooling. Okay. There we go. And just to give some realism to that drawing, this is what we're talking about from a scale standpoint. So horizontal applications, you can see they take up quite a bit of room. This is a commercial horizontal application right in Toronto. And surprisingly, like this is a fairly long trench, but it's pretty condensed, and a large 20-story condo tower would go on top of this. So economies of scale and technology have been improving to allow, these are each boreholes. So these each go down about 850 feet, and they actually bend underground so that they can, get more heat energy and take up less footprint on the surface. So a building would eventually be built over top of this. In suburban areas, you need drilling still, and the drilling rigs aren't huge, but you're not going to get that in the backyard. So you still need some space there. And then here is from local Buchanan and Hall, innovative technology here with directional drilling that's usually utilized for services, utility services. They've now adapted to geothermal loops as well, because obviously it makes quite a mess. And so where you don't want to make the mess, this is an excellent opportunity. What do we got? Okay, so why we're doing this, and just to give it a highlight, is efficiency, right? Essentially plugging a heat pump into the wall, because we do need to power the heat pump. It's like a refrigerator in your kitchen, and the heat pump sucks the heat out of the ground loop. And then in the summertime, it sucks the heat out of the house and dumps it into the ground loop very efficiently. And we talked about efficiencies of 350 to 500%. That's what we're seeing here. This is a real-time live view. Well, it's not live now. It was live in February 28th, 2019. This is a house in Hamilton with a vertical loop. And their COP on that day, that was the coldest day in 2019, was 4.72, which is almost 500% efficient. I buy 1 kilowatt of energy from the electricity grid. I put almost 5 kilowatts into my house worth of heat. And that has huge impacts for the homeowner, because the electricity they're paying for is now being multiplied by almost 5 times. The utility is essentially shaving the peak load. So if you think about in the summertime, most utilities, electric utilities, are summer peaking because everyone has their air conditioners on. Well, now that peak load is able to come down because your systems are so efficient. But then also electric utilities now get the benefit of shifting the load off of the gas company into their own fold. So their base load comes up a bit, and they're able to serve customers better. So efficiency is the main kicker here. Okay, and just, oops, I went too far. Oh, okay. And just to give an example, this has been done before as far as large scale transformation and adoption. And I can tell you, the federal government, I don't know if you just saw the Greener Homes program come out recently from Enercan. That's one policy measure that they're looking at, but this has been on their radar for a long time, is electrification and transformation of space heating to electricity. And the OGA recently did a study that hasn't been released yet, but we did a scan of jurisdictions around the world that have gone through this before, and Sweden is one of them. They started decarbonizing their grid space conditioning back in the late 80s. I think they actually got into it in the 70s, 80s when the oil embargo was going on, and they were mostly oil heated. So you can see a bit of their transformation as far as capacity of the market, space heating market, that is ground source heat pumps. This is market share for ground source heat pumps, so almost 60%. It starts to dip a little bit as air source heat pump technology plays in. And certainly in most communities or across Canada, as we look at electrification, it will be a mix of air source and ground source technologies, but adoption was quite high. And this is a look at a town in Sweden, I don't know how to say it, Sundbyberg. These are all geothermal installations, and likely all vertical installations, because this is a suburban town. These are all individual boreholes. There could be multiple boreholes here to service each of the homes. So they're not networked, they're not connected together. So they're not sharing and getting the benefit of that sharing, but you might not see that happening where you don't have large diversity of loads. If it's all just houses that are built the same, that have the same kind of heating and cooling profile, you might not get the extreme benefit. And then you can see what happened to, I mean, mostly Sweden was heating with oil beforehand, and that's been, they desperately had to do that. So that's why they were so aggressive with it. Oops. Okay. So that is a short primer. I will, Rose, do you want to, anything you want to, from a local perspective in Stratford, as far as tagging on to that? I don't want to miss anything. So.
No, you did a great job, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you. So questions?
Just before we go to questions, I want to apologize because I really messed up your names and what you're representing. It was right in front of me, but I don't know. I was just like, oh, Jeff's representing 3 different. No, there are 2 guests here, so welcome and my apologies.
It's okay.
It's Friday, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I saw.
No, it's Thursday. Is it Thursday?
Oh, Thursday.
I knew
It
that.
should be Friday.
Okay, so I saw a hand up. Was it? Oh, Jody. So I'll pass it to you, Jody.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So one of the questions locally, I think we asked at the last meeting, was that we do have local aquifer as our water source. So we have wells all around the city, smaller wells. So I'm wondering how that plays into it when we're talking about individual residential and going vertically, what kind of problems that might present.
Yeah, from the OGA's perspective, we're kind of just going down that road right now because there's some jurisdictions that have aquifer protection requirements there, rightfully so, and we need to have an understanding of how to properly work with that. I mean, drilling for geothermal is no different than a water well drilling, except we're not actually technically looking for water. We're sealing that borehole. We're drilling it and we're putting pipe in, and then we're totally sealing that borehole from cross-contamination of the aquifers and from surface contamination and that sort of thing. But there needs to be guidelines in place in how to do that. And I live over in Wellesley, and actually I'm in the aquifer protection area here, which Rose and I were just talking about the other day. And so the industry needs to come out with drilling guidelines, which is what we're working on, and share that with municipalities and have that conversation so that there's a process and a path to understanding vertical drilling in those situations. I don't know what in specific jurisdictions with aquifers, there's different regulations on using that water. I mean, it could be a situation where if a closed loop geothermal system is not adequate, which I think in Waterloo, there is the Evolve 1 building that was recently done, which is, I don't want to say it's right downtown because I forget where it is, but
Just on Herb Street.
Herb Street.
Yeah.
So it uses an open loop because there's an aquifer there. It just uses that open loop setup because there's tons of water there. And essentially all it's doing is just pulling that water through, extracting energy out of it, and then dumping that back into the aquifer.
Yeah, and we have an open system here in Stratford also. That was prior to the protection. And then also we have a couple of closed loop prior to the ban, I guess, on vertical drilling.
Yeah, so I think it's an education process, and our project with the OJs with the Atmospheric Fund, and so we're just putting that together with them right now. It'll be a guideline document, and then we need to communicate that with municipalities and get consensus.
Great, thank you.
Anita, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what are the pipes themselves actually made of, and do they ever have to be replaced?
Want me to answer that, Jeff? Or?
Please, yeah.
It's HDPE, or high density polyethylene. So basically it's the same type of pipe that natural gas is piped through. So it's said to last a couple of 100 years. We don't know. But generally there's several systems that they should last.
Anna, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm just wondering if you can tell us something about costs, both to the residential level and community level. And I wonder, would the community you showed us in Sweden be of a size comparable to Stratford, perhaps? And how was all that paid for? Were there government incentives, or do we know anything about that?
Yeah, we I can't tell you exact specifics on that community, but part of our jurisdictional scan, and the reason for that was to understand how they got from where they were to where they are, and what policy measures were put in place to do that. And again, that study is going to be out probably in the next week or so. But the major policy triggers were, government incentivization, like we're seeing with Green On program. Greener Homes program. Green On was many years ago, very similar. So trying to attract consumers and say, okay, well, here's an upfront rebate to help you with the cost if you're going in as a consumer alone. The other one that was identified that was actually stronger and more long lasting was rebated utilities or discounted utility rates for those consumers that were engaging in the technology. Because if you're looking at it from a local utilities point of view, like I mentioned, they're shaving their peaks, increasing their base load. So from an economic situation, it's good for them. So offering those customers a lower kilowatt hour charge for those applications certainly is beneficial and helps increase adoption. Carbon pricing policies also help that. And rights of way access in those communities. So municipalities understanding the importance of low carbon heating technologies and allowing rights of way access to those utility rights of ways to be able to incorporate that easily. Because obviously you can see in some situations, even front lawns aren't large enough to, or aren't accessible to do that. So if those utility rights of ways are accessible to thermal energy technology as well, then great to use those. With respect to costs, so when you're looking at a community scale networked solution, it's just like, it's kind of like a condo tower as well. And that's where those economies of scale have been really successful in the last few years, is you're seeing those utility models being able to capitalize that first cost and then amortize it and provide those consumers or those condo owners with a lower monthly rate. And in the case of the condos, I'm just going to relate to condos here. Like a condo on the inside of the building, the equipment is no different, is typically no different. Like they're pretty similar than a conventional building. They get to get rid of some of their equipment on the roof, and it all becomes now underground. And so the building can actually see a savings from making that change. And so the same thing with a community level single family homes networked, is that opportunity, if there's a utility out there or an entity that's able to capitalize that upfront cost. And this is what Whisper Valley has done with EcoSmart, I believe is the organization that is working with Whisper Valley to capitalize that and then lease it out to the homeowners. And I think the homeowners pay something like $28 a month for their thermal energy from that grid. But there's a lot that goes into that capital cost. I mean, there's a lot that's in that, right? We need to understand the geology of the ground on the site. So what's it made of? Because that has an impact on how much pipe actually needs to go into the ground. And so that's going to impact the capital cost. Understanding that load diversity. So if we are unbalanced loads, if all the houses are built the same and they're heating and cooling the same way, so they're heating more and cooling less, then we're going to have an unbalanced load in that overall loop. And you might not see the advantage of being able to reduce the number of boreholes because you've got everybody together. So then you're into, okay, we need to add more energy into this loop if we're not balanced, and that could be a boiler. Or it could be the other way around, with high performance houses now are actually in some cases cooling dominant. And if we look at the changing climate in southwestern Ontario over the next 30, 50 years, I mean, it's going to get kind of warm. From a peak cooling day standpoint, the coincidence of 30 plus days is going to get greater and greater. So we're going to be cooling more and more. So those are some of the considerations there. But the advantage of doing it all together in one shot as one big package is if you have somebody with the capital and can amortize that out and lease it out, that's great. Kind of takes that burden off the individual homeowner. But there are other measures that you can direct at the homeowner to help do the same thing. And the single systems, single per home, are, to my opinion, simple and easy, tried and true.
And Jeff, some of the homes that are developed, especially in New York State, what they're doing is they're putting the loop underneath the building itself, which, you know, reduces the area needed to put in a ground loop.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, because if you're looking at a greenfield development, whether you're going networked or individual homes, if you're getting in there as one of the services providers beforehand, you're drilling where you're drilling, right? And then you build over top, or you put your grass over top, and you're in and out and no one knows. So.
Okay, Mike Jorna, I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Bonnie.
Yes, thank you. Would it make any sense for, say, the city of Stratford to start planning to provide geothermal energy as a utility by coordinating it with the reconstruction process of, say, the roads that get done every so many years, or indeed by directional drilling and then closing the loops at either end and having the homeowners over a period of time each hook up to a larger system? Does that make sense? Since a city would have the capacity, I think, to do the capital investment.
I think so. That would be the ideal world, but be a nice. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I look at a city and I think about we have a massive challenge in front of us. Like, this is electrification of space conditioning seems to be, when you look at carbon emissions in a given municipality, it's transportation, buildings, industry. I mean, buildings is pretty high up there, and electrification of space conditioning, because space conditioning emissions are like 80-something% of the emissions pie of a typical home. So to decarbonize houses, space conditioning. And if you're a municipality that has the capital to be able to provide its residents with a thermal energy utility, I think that would be a great revenue source. If you have the ability to be able to coordinate that in those rights of way to provide that access, and being able to go along as you go along and make those changes, for sure. I guess that the decision is whether or not you need to link them together, right? And that requires or network them together in a district type system. And that requires engineering feasibility studies to understand, economics of that and why you would or wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and that would make more sense in streets and areas within the city where the building lots are basically too small to do a horizontal system, unless we decide to go with vertical loops and allow them with our water table legislation. I think a shared horizontal system in the road allowance would probably provide the amount of energy that would be required, but you couldn't do that instantly. It would take literally years, but then we've got till 2050.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the more we wait, the more those emissions are emitted, and the quicker you get at this, not to put urgency at it, but it is an urgent thing. I think anytime you're within in the city bounds, in typical streets, you're probably generally going to need to be vertical to be able to get the energy, because we're, in some cases you're going down 200 feet, 180, 200 feet, or even up to, like, some of those condo towers are up to 850 feet deep now to get their energy. So I mean, it's not insignificant amount of pipe to put in there. In a condensed street, yeah, you'd be vertical for sure. So I mean, I want to make sure it's the decision is whether or not you need to link, and I think it's a community street by street type assessment. Is there room to be able to drill enough boreholes per house that we can serve the energy needs of that house, both heating and cooling? If there isn't, then that's probably the case where you say, okay, well, we need to study whether or not, say one, and this is what Whisper Valley did, was one bore per house. And then because of diversity of the loads in the houses, so some people aren't home, so the thermostat's turned down, or this house heats differently, they know that in peak condition, the loop is going to be okay. So the loop is kind of undersized, but they're counting on the different thermal loads in the different buildings to make up that difference. So that's the decision that needs to be made. And I guess all I'm saying is that from a simplistic point of view, when you have the room to be able to put enough pipe per house, one loop, from a utility standpoint, that's simple, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Not to put you on the spot, but Johnny, I see you're on the call. Did you want to speak to that point at all, or not?
No, that's fine. I think, yeah, there's a much bigger discussion, because one thing I wanted to clarify is Whisper Valley, the example you're alluding to, Jeff, is that's a new development, correct?
Yeah.
Similar to Markham. So I think,
Yeah.
Mr. Dorna, you're referring to a road reconstruction where which I think is significantly different, because if you're looking at a road reconstruction, you're essentially putting in infrastructure that you're hoping people will pay out of their own pocket to connect to on the private side, which I think is very different than a Whisper Valley scenario where all these homes are pre-designed to have that in place already. So I think the financial impacts are very different of the two. To install that kind of infrastructure on a new, not to say that it certainly couldn't be done or something that could be explored, but then you also have to get a utility company on board that would essentially have to somewhat finance that, pay out of pocket to install that infrastructure in the hopes that these homeowners do connect. So if they don't have that commitment ahead of time from these existing homeowners, I would see that being a big hurdle for those companies to take that kind of risk to want to move forward with that infrastructure, just in the hopes that people would connect to geothermal. And most of these homes typically will already have a furnace, or they'll have electric heat or something. So that's why I think the new development is a better exploration. That's just my opinion. Again, this is something we're all kind of learning, and myself as well. I'm learning as I go. So it's great to have Jeff and Rose here to speak to it, because it gives us some more perspective on it. But hopefully that doesn't muddle things anymore.
I totally agree. Yeah, it is. That's kind of a challenge, and I guess one of the things that might factor in. I'm thinking of where I was reading this recently, where it was the same situation where I think this was in the Boston area, where I think it was a new development, but they weren't forced to go with geothermal, but they did the infrastructure anyways, and they essentially put the pipes into the house, and that's how they left it. They didn't charge the loop or anything. They just waited for the homeowner to make the decision on whether they did or not. And when you think about, I mean, if we stay on this path of carbon pricing, and so fuels and even natural gas will get more and more expensive, and then just the economics might play a little better in those situations in the future. But you're totally right.
Thank you for joining or adding your 2 cents, Johnny. So Bonnie, you have your hand up, and then Sammy.
So I have 2 questions. One is, you mentioned about putting the pipes under new construction and that, and I think was Rose said that, you know, they don't know how long the pipes will last, maybe 200 years. How do you ever replace something if it's under a huge building? And my second question is, and I might have missed it, do you have an approximate cost comparison between what, say, now I guess I'm confused here. Does it just replace my gas, or does my gas and my hydro? Sorry if I've missed that.
Not at all. So what was the first one? Yeah. You know, you wouldn't be replacing the pipes ever. So once the process in installing them, once they're installed, everything is just like kind of like a gas pipe system where you are pressure testing and checking for leaks. That's all done before anything's buried. And we know, like, essentially high density polyethylene, it's a particular grade of it, but it literally has a half-life of like 1,000 years. So we're only putting a number on it because to give it a number. So you would never recover it, and it would be gone. But once it's essentially, when you're installing it, you use heat fusion. So the molecules of the pipe kind of blend together. So it essentially becomes one continuous piece of pipe. Unless somebody's going to drill through it, it'll be there forever.
So basically the house would be gone before the piping.
It would be, yes.
Okay, and then my other part of the question was about the cost.
Yeah, so we're not replacing electricity. So we need electricity to power the process, the heat pump itself. But I think the good definition here is the thermal energy that we actually get from the ground. Technically, that's free. It's there. We're just paying to move it to and from the house using the heat pump. And that cost is 5 to 1. So every dollar we put in to pay for the electricity, we're getting $5 worth of heat. So if somebody raises the price of electricity by, 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour, you can divide that increase by 5 because it's not impacting you as much, because most of your energy is the actual thermal energy you're getting from the ground loop. As far as operational costs, I mean, that's our struggle right now against natural gas, because natural gas is historically cheap. If you look at the price chart, and I think it was probably in the 2006-07 era when fracking became more mainstream and you saw the price of natural gas dive. I don't know what's going to happen with it now, but if you look at actually the city of Markham on one of their municipal presentations recently projected the price of natural gas out to 2030 with the impact of the carbon pricing. So when carbon pricing is $170 a ton, I think it was like 54 cents a cubic meter of natural gas. And I'm not sure that actually even includes distribution and all the other stuff they add onto your bill. So Rose, you might have to help me with this, because right now, the best natural gas furnace on the market is something that's like a modulating 98% efficient furnace. And so a geothermal heat pump compared to that, from an annual cost perspective operations, are we like 50% savings, Rose?
Between natural gas and
geothermal? I think we're somewhere around 50% from the actual run cost between natural gas and a geothermal furnace is about 50% annually. When you take those numbers, okay, well, my house in Wellesley, I think I don't know, $1,600 a year for natural gas. So, I mean, the payback isn't there because I'm only saving $800 a year. It would take me a while to pay that back. Conversely, oil and propane are a little more expensive and the energy content is different. So the savings in those applications, even today, are a little bit better because the installation costs are also lower because you can, install them horizontally. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I guess I'm just comparing that. We just put a new furnace and air conditioner in. So we've got the high energy efficient. So it should be good for at least, well, I guess things don't last as long as they used to. But so basically, if you compare the cost of putting a new furnace in and saving $800 a year compared to the cost, like, Rose, what is an average cost? And I guess my other question is, have we actually done one in Stratford?
We've done several in Stratford, yeah. In fact, our building is fully done with geothermal here. So we're a completely carbon-free and net zero building here.
Wow, right on.
So we have photovoltaic on the roof.
So
What's
what
that?
would it cost to say, run it into my house? Because there wouldn't be anything on the street, right? Oh, you don't have to come in for the street, you just go down. So what would it cost to say, put one in? Because then I'd have to figure out what a cost of a furnace is versus saving, say, 800 a year. And
So a vertical bore system is, again, something more expensive than a standard installation that would be in the country. As Jeff mentioned, if we just used an excavator and, you know, dug in the loop, a lot less money. And when we actually put them in horizontally, like the way that Jeff described, and we're doing probably the majority of them that way with our drill, it's a bit more money because it's labor intensive. We're there 3-4 days versus being there for a single day. But we always sell that equipment or that style of loop based on most farmers recognize that when they're digging up property, they're losing yield on their farm. So, you know, they're quite willing to do it that way. But again, it is a little bit more money. But when you're getting into vertical, because that's not something that we do as a company, it's subcontracted to a specialized, contractor, and they have to be certified too by the MOE or the Ministry of Environment. So there's cost involved with that. So if you're going that route, you're adding a lot more cost. But I would say I've just recently quoted one. I think you're around 33,000 if it's vertically done, you know. But that's just from my experience of quoting. So it is fairly expensive when you're going into that type of.
but if you did a whole subdivision, would it still be that kind of price?
Nope, I don't think so.
You know, we get this in and then, you know, we're having a big, huge building thing going on out McCarthy and a lone type thing. Like, it'd be a lot
Yeah.
different in price if somebody
Yeah,
was
a
doing a
lot different,
whole
yeah.
subdivision thing, right?
Yep.
Rather than somebody individually doing it.
For sure, it would be a lot cheaper if you know, it was as Jeff mentioned too, as a combined loop field would be less expensive. And sometimes too, what's happening in municipalities, they're using the green space to put geothermal in too. We just did a massive one in London, and it was all green space that we put it in, and you can stack the ground loop also, so you don't have to lay it out in one layer. You can stack it. Hope that answers your question.
I just want to. Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I mean, with a furnace of any kind, gas, oil, propane, we've been heating our houses with fire for generations and generations. So we have to little bit of a change of thought, because a gas furnace or whatever it is a box where we bring explosive gas into a box and we combust it and we heat ourselves off of the byproduct of combustion. The problem is the other byproducts of combustion aren't so good. Nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. Like, those are the things we need to get rid of. So where it's a whole new way of thinking about our energy systems, because with heat pumps, all we're doing is we're just moving. The energy's already there. Like, the sun put it there for us to use. All we're doing is moving it to and fro. So it's a different bit of a technology. So yeah.
And following up on what you just said, Jeff.
Well, Mike, Sammy was actually next, and then we can go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
We got a queue. We'll go Sammy and then back to you, Mike.
Perfect.
So like you said, it would be difficult to go with reconstruction. So when we're reconstructing roads to build that system. So in the recent past, E&E has looked into requiring new buildings to meet passive requirements. Would it need to be something along that route where new developments in Stratford would need to have that geothermal connection underneath?
That's a very good point. And I should have mentioned that earlier. One of the other policy triggers that has been very effective, and I think you're going to start seeing it throughout Canada, municipalities with their own green standards and building standards. That's example of that is actually in Toronto with the Toronto Green Standard, which has really been leading the way. And that is turning up the dial on developers and builders to incorporate these new technologies into their buildings. Even so, I think even in Toronto is going to be no natural gas or new natural gas by 2030 or sooner. They're very aggressive with it. So yes, if I answer the question right, green standards for building in communities and houses is a really good policy trigger.
And one thing about new construction too, unlike retrofits, is the homes are required to be extremely airtight now. So the size of the heat pump, the size of the loop field, all of that is reduced, and the cost is reduced substantially too. So that's something to factor in also.
Okay, Mike, you're up.
Okay, well, a couple of times the cost of conversion has been mentioned, and we as a group exist here to advise the elected council of the city of Stratford. And I think that one of the things that the council has to start getting into its head, as well as every citizen, is that cost is something that we may have to consider from a point of view of what is the cost of not doing this? Because we are headed for zero carbon time, which I won't see, but I think we should start heading towards it right now, right away. And we should start planning the best possible system to not only deal with new construction, but to see what we can do to retrofit the existing, if I can call it that, old city. We have to really do things and find out what the cost is of not doing these.
If the only comment I want to put in there is just, yeah, I agree with you that, and the cost of different technologies. And I'm just going to, first part of our study that we did at the OGA, it was done with Dunsky Energy Consulting out of Ottawa, looked at the costs of electrification because the Canadian Gas Association, I think a year or two ago, came out and actually said, well, we did an analysis and this is how much it's going to cost. I think it was like $1.2 trillion or something like that to electrify space conditioning. And they didn't, the thing that they failed to do was include ground source heat pumps in that study. So that was our study, was to throw ground source heat pumps into that consideration. And essentially, well, we think it's actually more, and we just didn't want to start too big of a fight, but it's cut it like basically in half, save $500 billion if, you know, in different adoption cases, but the biggest one was $500 billion if geothermal was incorporated into the solution. So utilizing technologies appropriately can help keep those societal costs as a whole. And that's the problem, is with geothermal, we're pushing these costs on individual consumers, but the beneficiary is the society as a whole. So somehow that cost needs to, yeah.
And some of the costs should be factored in too, is the concern of, you know, disasters that happen based on climate change too. So that should be factored into part of the cost.
So we can approach city council and say, we have a proposal for you that will save you $500 billion.
That was Canada wide. So I thought.
Oh, okay. So we'll just remove the zero. Mike Sullivan, I saw your hand, and then Jody, please.
So thanks very much for this presentation, Jeff and Rose. The question I have is whether or not a appropriately sized ground source is a barrier. In other words, people are not going to spend $30,000 to drill a hole in their front yard because that's just too big a number. And what Mike Jorna has been talking about is the city going around as it rebuilds roads, putting in loops under the roads for each home. So is it possible to combine ground source and air source heat pumps technology in the same facility, so that you get as much as you can out of the size loop you can put in, because you don't have $30,000 to put in a big loop, and the rest you get from air source. And is that worth doing?
There is, yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
There is technology out there that allows for, so say you have an undersized ground loop that was installed a number of years ago. Technology there that allows for being able to pull some of the heat energy from the air, like with an air source heat pump that supplements that ground loop. Yeah, so there is technology out there to help supplement that.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I'm seeing some in Europe, integrated technologies with their hybrid heat pumps. So they'll do both water source and air source. And then you get into control strategies. It's not really in a consumer way, in a nice way. It's not here yet. I think you would look at then I think like across Canada, it's going to be a mix of air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. Like we know we need to electrify space conditioning. So choosing the applications that make the most sense. And we know that ground source has the consistent efficiency and it helps us at peak, right? You want as many ground source heat pumps as you can if you're a utility to reduce that peak. So it's kind of a understanding which applications will need air source heat pumps and which ones can you do ground source.
Can I go ahead? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking about the city of Stratford as a corporation, and we have a lot of corporate buildings that we look after. And I was just thinking about, actually, it's kind of a pet idea of mine I really would like to see happen. You were talking about green space being used to perhaps do horizontal type system. What about under parking lots? And my thought is, for here in Stratford, the Rotary Complex parking lot is scheduled to be redone next year. It's being repaved. I don't think the plan was to dig down 6 feet, but if it's worth it, if you think a system like that would be useful for the heating and cooling of an arena, which is hugely, that's our building that produces the most GHG in the city. So is that a practical suggestion moving forward?
Well, again, you could do it a number of ways. You could horizontally drill it. You could, you can't in Stratford vertically drill, but you could horizontally drill that. There's a number of buildings. I don't know if you're familiar with the Stratford Chiropractic Wellness Center. Is anybody? So underneath that parking lot, there's a massive ground loop that's stacked. They had environmental contamination in that lot, so they had to truck out loads and loads of fill from that area. So we took advantage of that and installed a ground loop in that parking lot. So it's done all the time. Yep. But again, to remove all the fill, just to resurface a parking lot, I would say it's more practical to drill that in than it would be to remove the fill and then resurface. But that's just my opinion.
Green space is great for applications like schools, right? Because they usually have big soccer fields, and that was the application down in London. So they totally decarbonized an existing old school, John Paul II, and because they had enough room in the soccer field to do it. So understanding and ice rinks are a bit of a different beast. So understanding the loads in the building and then how much room do we have to actually do that is the question.
And again, all of that would be engineered.
I'm thinking maybe that's our project for 2022, Jody. Yeah.
Well, why not?
Why not? Bonnie, I see your hand up.
Well, we have the huge green space beside the water complex, but you mentioned that ice rinks are a different beast. Is it possible to still do geothermal or something like that? It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's understanding it's an understanding of your sources and your sinks, right? So all a geothermal loop is, in the wintertime, it's a source, in the summertime, it's a sink. So if you have other sources and sinks, which in a ice rink, you have the stands and stuff. So, but the load, so understanding, obviously engineering in there to understand the load to chill the surface of the ice, that heat that we're taking out of the surface of the ice, how much of it can we dump in the stands, and where can we dump the rest of it? And how much, if it's all going back to a loop, then how much loop do we need to dump all that energy into, and how much space we need to serve that loop, right? If there's buildings around, which is ideal with an ice rink, if you got buildings all the way around and you've got all this heat, if you can dump that into other buildings, then that reduces the size of the ground loop required. The more balance and the more reduction of the ground loop, the obviously better of the economics.
So we do have another building right next to it, the Agriplex, which could be then heated with that. So yeah, there is a possibility there for some synergy, I would think.
So the big thing if that's a situation, then the big thing is a energy analysis study, engineering to look at performance analysis of the building hourly, monthly, annually, just to get a real understanding of the energy requirements and the energy loads of both buildings. And then they can take a broader scope of that to see how geothermal would fit in. And there are third-party, I don't call them third-party, but there are geothermal expert engineers that do modeling on these types of systems, and that's all they do. So they coordinate with engineering consultants that do the mechanical side of it and do the building modeling, and then they kind of work together to figure out how the two connect.
And oftentimes buildings like that are a mix of hybrid systems, typically too. A bit of geo and a bit of normal. Right?
Okay, any more questions? I don't see any. Jeff and Rose, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a heck of a lot more than I thought I would. And I think people can probably agree. So thank you for taking the time and joining us. And thank you, Johnny, for arranging this, because you put us in touch with both Jeff and Rose for today's meeting. The committee, certainly lots to discuss. I think the committee will move on to the rest of its agenda. You are welcome to stay, but we will not be offended if you leave our Zoom webinar. So thank you again, and really nice to meet you, even virtually.
Great.
And thanks
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciated it's really
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome. That's really interesting. I had no idea that Buchanan and Hall was a net zero building. And I didn't know my chiropractor had that installed in their parking lot. It's amazing.
You're welcome to take a tour after COVID anytime.
Okay. That'll be our first outing.
Okay, thanks.
Together. All right. Awesome. So maybe some food for thought is based on this information that they shared today, what makes sense as a committee in terms of motions to put forward. I think in the interest of time, maybe we go away and sit with that information and come back to our next meeting with some suggestions. I'm seeing some nods, some people in favor of that. But I would think that there's some things that we could suggest at the committee level that would kind of lend itself to moving some of these ideas forward. Yeah. Okay. Still so weird to run a meeting on Zoom, like looking around to see if people are in agreement. Okay, let me get back to my agenda. Nope, that just made everyone bigger. There we go. Okay. So updates from the carbon reduction and ecological working groups. Who would like to go first? Craig, I see you put your hand up. We'll go with you. Do you have an update today? I know you gave one last month.
No, I haven't really got anything to update on that one. I don't know if Bonnie does or not, but or anybody else, but nothing really to report that would be different from what we've been reported before, other than I guess Brad and I are taking a walk around the lake on Monday and doing a kind of a reconnaissance survey to see if there's anything else that can be done along the lake. And we have a few ideas that we want to see if they will work. I guess one update, we're going to be planting aquatic plants on the South Shore over there by the Tom Patterson Island, that work that we did a few years ago, and all the ducks ate them. So I've been scheming to try and come up with something that would stop the ducks from eating them. I got something, but I have to get it by Quinn, because Quinn wants it to look pretty, and I don't know that it looks pretty, but it involves kind of putting something over top of one of the cribs just to try it out to see if it'll work. Some screening, making a frame, and then plunking it in just to keep those things out of there, just to give it a chance so those plants would catch. And then if they caught, theoretically, then you move it to the next one. So I guess that's what I've got up my sleeve, and whether or not it works or not, I don't know, but I got to get it through Quinn. So we'll see. Anyway, that's just an aside, I guess.
So you just have to convince Quinn of the beauty of it.
Yeah, he thinks it'll attract garbage. So I don't know.
Oh, like garbage from the water that's already in?
Yeah, or cups or something. I don't know, which I can see it could potentially could do that, but I don't know. I think the benefit outweigh that.
Yeah, and what if it's catching cups that are already in the water? Isn't that a good thing? Because then we can collect them.
Yeah, I'll pitch that to him.
Okay.
We'll see where that goes.
Okay. Thank you for that update. And Anna, for carbon reduction working group.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Isn't this our last meeting of the year until the fall now?
Until September.
So we have lots to think about over the summer. Just to report that we did have our webinar on ecological economics, and it went very well with Eric Miller. Lots to digest. The session is obviously on the Stratford site. If the climate change page, by the way, is beginning to look really great with all the stuff that's on it. But it was really informative. I think we all learned about carbon pricing, certainly I did, and how we begin to measure economically our ecological footprint and our options going forward. And one of the things that Eric did most generously is he created a page for us. And I've asked Mike to put it up on the climate change page, but it's a page just for Stratford. So he put up all the slides that he used, and you can contact him if you want to chat with him, if you have any questions, direct it. He put up his email, and he put up a number of resources, one of which was to talk about ecological. There's an ecological economist international community, and there are a lot of resources that they have. And one of the ideas that came out of it was the idea of beginning to work on developing carbon budgets, not only personally, but municipalities and governments, and how we do that, make budgets going forward. So along with your financial plan, you have a carbon budget plan, and they're working on that at York. We had a really lively question and answer period with Emily and Jeff leading the questions, and Mike handling the whole thing extremely well, and Tatiana again stick handling for us, so that was great. So we then we have the invasive session coming up on Tuesday, and that posting's gone out today, so please share it if you can. And we talked about what we would do in the fall. So Climate Momentum will take the first one in September, and they will hope to do the one with the climate change coordinator, whom we hope to have appointed by then. And then we've talked about in the fall having sessions on energy, and very much along the lines of continuing this conversation about options for people in terms of reducing your carbon footprint in terms of energy. So a full discussion about recycling and what happens with recycling. And also we've talked about having a session about Indigenous approaches to environmental issues. And we welcome any input that people have on topics they'd like to see or individuals. Anything else? I don't know. Is there anything else to cover? Anybody? Tammy, did you want to add something?
I think we were also, I'm not sure if this was an update, but it just that we have compiled a doc and we're hoping to put together some motions for the fall so that once the climate action plan has been passed, we can start putting those motions through and start some action.
That's right. We've got a Google Doc that we can share with everybody to add their ideas into that. Jody?
Yeah, just a quick note that a climate change coordinator was hired and she'll be starting it in the next 2 weeks, I think. So by the time September rolls around, hopefully she'll be well versed and ready to help us out.
Great, that's wonderful news. Okay.
I wondered if Casey, we could invite her to our September meeting. Might be a good welcome.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she is starting soon, so she'll be kind of caught up by then, hopefully. We're a friendly committee anyways.
Okay, I think that's it, unless there's something I've left out.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I remember at the end of Eric's presentation, so he mentioned putting together the page about Stratford, and Mike, you and Eric had a little exchange about students and possibly there being a potential for working with Eric on a project for the city. And Mike, can you speak to that at all in terms of like what that might look like, or do you have any ideas?
I don't even remember talking about it.
Oh, no?
No. But
well,
he is working with a number of student groups developing the ecological footprint idea for York, and maybe that's what we were talking about, was assigning some of his students to develop an ecological footprint for the city of Stratford. But I honestly don't remember it.
Well, through the page, we can ask him questions. We can have a chat with him. We can email him. He's made himself very available to us. So it's elge.ca/Stratford. It's at the very end. If you fast forward through the recording, you'll see the posting.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of like walking through a potential project for the city of Stratford. How I remembered it, but I can go back and rewatch that part.
You can just email him. He was very responsive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's it for the for the working group. So yes, we have the one on Tuesday at 7 p.m. all about invasive species, and this is in partnership with the Stratford Field Naturalists and Climate Momentum. Okay, so business arising from previous minutes. I've mentioned this a few times that I'd just like to get some numbers on the books for our budget allocation, because again, we aren't meeting until September. We take a bit of a summer break, and other than, I think what I read was that it was up to $500 set aside for honorariums for the webinars. Other than that, we have not spent any money, right, Casey? We did pass a motion to provide refreshments for the tree power volunteers, but then we couldn't have any tree power volunteers, so that money was not spent.
We spend it?
Oh, no, we didn't. No, we didn't spend it.
No, we did spend it on a sign.
On a sign, but that was not $150.
No, it was like $50.
I was going to say 30. So yeah, that's the other, you're right, Jody. That's the one expenditure we had, but not 150. So what I had earmarked based on previous discussions was Every year we have, our total budget is $18,500, and every year 10,000 of that is earmarked for the Avon River project that we do each year. And then other than that, I have up to 3,000 on invasive species work occurring in TJ Dolan, and my understanding is that that's adequate based on feedback from the Upper Thames. And I also have up to $3,000 for an LID project at the Stratford Skate Park, and that's more on the design work. And again, we've talked about this a few times, and that seems more than reasonable as well. So that, based on my math, that's 16,500. So we have just under 2,000 remaining, assuming that we are all in favor of those kind of earmarked dollars. And if we are in favor of those earmarked dollars, then I think what we should do is pass motions for each of those of spending up to those amounts, so that should something arise during the break, that is kind of taken care of, and also so that we aren't scrambling at the end of the year. So does anyone have any comments based on that? Anna?
I was just looking at our notes about the idling bylaw, and there was some thought that we would help with signage. Might we think about spending some of that money on the signage, on the idling signs?
Bonnie?
I think at the ITS meeting that he said they still had lots of signs there, like the little plastic things that go in there. Now, I can't remember. I know Perth County Greenworks did the brochure, and I'd have to look it up, but I can't remember what all we put in that, but we might have to change that, because obviously we're changing it to the 1 minute. Well, it's been passed at ITS, it has to come to council, but we're changing it to 1 minute and that.
Yeah,
let's change the pamphlet. I have to get it and read it.
Yeah, when I asked Chris about setting aside money for signage, he said that would be covered by a different part of the budget. Jody, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, the report as it went forward recommended that the city would just use out of the sign budget for the signs, and that possibly this committee could use some money to cover any brochures or bookmarks or whatever it is, if we felt that we wanted to have some additional educational material to distribute. But yeah, like we'd want to freshen up anything. We don't need to use that old stuff. I think we need a new, fresh campaign, and maybe it becomes some social media stuff. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, could probably shift a lot of the promotion of it to online. Bonnie, are you meaning to show us that? The basket that's on your lap? Okay, so that is, Anna, you brought that up as a potential other budget item. Any further comments about the suggested spends? So invasive species and LID. Is someone prepared to make a motion for probably two separate motions for those spending ideas?
I don't know what would be best, Emily, if we just do one motion and list the shoreline, the invasive species, the low impact, and the webinars all as one.
Did you guys not pass the webinar one last month?
Yes, we did actually.
Oh.
Yeah, we did.
Well, then, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, obviously. It's up to you. Is it easier to have it all in one?
I think so.
I guess the difference would be if someone didn't want to spend on one thing, but did want to spend on the others. But I'm not seeing much from the committee members, so I think everyone's okay with it. So who would like to make that motion? Jody, did you raise your hand? Yeah. So Casey, do you need me to repeat those numbers?
So is it still the shoreline work, the 10,000 and 3,000 each for invasive species and the low impact? Okay.
Yep. That's all I have. At one point, there had been a discussion about a naturalization project at the Stratford District Secondary School. Is that potentially this year?
I was maybe hoping to give an update later under new business regarding that. If you'd like me to do that now, I can, or later, whenever.
May as well do it now because we're talking numbers.
For sure. Okay, so the Eco Club and Green Industries is currently working on putting together a proposal for an outdoor classroom in front where I'm not sure if you know the school property well, but there used to be portables in the front and now they've been taken out and it looks horrible. Oh my gosh. It doesn't look so great right now. So we're hoping to turn it into an outdoor classroom. So there's going to be benches and mulched areas, native species of plants and bushes. And also we have I think we have 6 trees right now that we're hoping to plant there. So it'll be a really nice area. It hasn't been passed through the board yet, the school board, just because that is a really slow process and it takes a while to get through the board. So it's not official and we can't start funding for it yet, but I was hoping to put it on Energy Environment's radar that hopefully maybe in the future ENE could help with around $1,000 for helping us buy some native plant species.
So would that maybe be a 2022 thing, Sammy? Like, does it move that slow?
It's really hard to say, but yeah, maybe late fall or maybe even 2022, I'm not sure, but yeah, it hasn't gone through yet. And since school's off, it won't be worked on through the summer months. So it'll start up again in September.
Okay. Well, keep us updated when you can. Okay. Any other budget discussions? No. That almost takes care of the budget, and we still have 4 meetings remaining in the year, right? Okay. Business. Oh, Sammy, you're back up for an update on the reusable container program.
Emily, we didn't finish with the motion.
Oh my gosh.
You've got Jody. Jody moved it. We need a second.
I feel like I'm half here today, obviously. Okay, so Jody moved that, seconded by Anna. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Oh, okay. So the update on reusable container program. Sammy, passing it to you.
Yeah, so we still have those 3 restaurants signed on. No change with that. So Mercer's, Prazos, and Pulp, you can order from them and you'll get it in a little blue container. And I gotta say, it's really exciting to have that feeling to pick it up and helping support local and knowing that that container isn't going to be thrown out. I'm not sure if you guys would feel that way, but I know when we certainly ordered, it was really exciting. So I'd 100% recommend you to do that. But the committee of citizens who started kind of looking into this idea in January are still continuing to meet. They are currently working on communication, so we're hoping to put together some information to communicate out to the public, but also restaurants. We're looking into some future presentations, so that's to the ATAC committee, Rotary, hopefully City Council, and maybe even Energy Environment in the future. We're also looking right now to increase receptacles in the downtown area and alfresco area because we've had some issues in the past. You might have seen it, but they've been overflowing in past years, and it's been a really big issue around a lot of garbage, but also recycling. Mm-hmm. And now that we have a green bin program, we're looking into potentially putting in some green bin collection receptacles downtown, which would be a great additional asset. And we are also, that committee is also researching what is recyclable and compostable in Stratford because it can be sometimes confusing. So even though a company says that this container is compostable, it might not be compostable in our area. So we're trying to weed through and sort through some different resources, including connecting with Stormfisher, which is where our recycling and garbage and green bin stuff goes. And then one thing that Vicky and I, so Vicky Lass is co-leading this group with us. We thought that maybe Energy Environment could push for a reusable container mandate to include in city events. So that can be like Heartburn Day, Chili Day, Soups On, those kind of things. So we were thinking if E&E would be interested in taking that on. And if you would, we can connect you with a friendlier company and maybe you could collaborate with them and the city for that. And that's the update.
Okay, I was just checking to see, thank you, Sammy. I was just checking to see if Kate's still on, but I guess she had to go. I will say from Mercer's perspective, it's all they're using is the reusable containers. And Ryan said that customers love it. He's heard nothing negative, and they just worked the fee into their menu item cost, and you obviously get that back once you drop it off, but it's going really well. And they wouldn't have done it if you hadn't done the legwork and put the research in and proposed the idea. They wanted to, but they just didn't find the time to do it. So thank you for taking that on. I am equally excited when those reusable takeout containers come into my house. Okay, Anna, you have new business in terms of the land acknowledgement.
Well, this is a particularly hot issue at the moment. What to say? What I want to report, I mean, we had written a land acknowledgement to read on behalf of the committee, but we learned that the city couldn't really give us approval because the city doesn't have a land acknowledgement itself, nor a policy. So in exchanges with Tatiana, I understand that the staff are working on one and that it should happen soon. But in the meantime, Climate Momentum read the land acknowledgement, and Bill James Aber will read it again on Tuesday night for the invasive species. But I don't know if we want to push the city, especially in light of recent current news. It's a really important thing that the city have a land acknowledgement. And I think Bill may want to rework the one on Tuesday to say more about the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, because we've only enacted 10 of them out of the 94. So the city is working on it. I don't know if Bonnie and Jody want to say anything about that, but.
I see Jody's hand up. Jody?
Yes. Yeah, we had in the past, the council had requested that we do a land acknowledgement, but the information that staff brought back was that there was some disagreement or there wasn't quite settled exactly whose lands, who we should be acknowledging. And it was sort of, that was it. So, but in light of the events that happened this week, I have put in a request. Well, I'm actually planning to do a notice of motion to bring that back forward to make sure that we're doing that in good time, as well as looking at all the recommendations, the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Committee to make sure that we're addressing all of the ones that talk about municipal governments. So Waterloo has a great example of how in October of 2019, they went through and went one by one, the recommendations that mentioned municipalities, and did some research into it. So I'm going to be asking that those two reports come back to us as soon as possible. So yeah, it's hopefully in motion, and we'll keep the energy up, hopefully.
Great, thank you.
So then it sounds like as far as a motion from Energy and Environment wouldn't really accomplish anything at this point? Like, do you feel like it would be helpful to you, Jody, in terms of what you'll be putting forward, or?
It can't hurt, because then it shows that, you know, it's on a lot of people's minds, not just mine. So, you know, we actually did hear today from the BIA. And so there is interest from different groups in the city. So I think adding our voice to it it can't hurt.
Okay. Anna, will you remind me, did you have kind of a motion drafted in one of the emails that you sent me? I know that you have.
I didn't draft a motion, but I think the motion would be that it is of, we'd request the city act immediately on the implementation of a land acknowledgement or something to that effect.
Sammy?
I was just thinking that if we do pass a motion to encourage and push city council to put together a land acknowledgement, could we also include that they do a land acknowledgement before every council meeting?
Yeah, I just kind of assumed that that was part of it, that we have one and then that be read at every
every city event, which would include E&E events, right?
Right. So yeah, I just assumed, but I guess I shouldn't assume that.
That was part of the original motion.
Okay. Okay.
But the other thing, I don't know whether we can do this, but a number of the calls to action are also meant for municipalities and other levels of government. So we might want to add that we would ask that where there are calls to action that the city can make that are recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we urge them to do that.
Well, and I think you were screening phone calls at the time, but Jody was sharing that that's what Waterloo Region did in 2019, that they went through and addressed the items, the action items that included municipal action.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So Anna, would you like to put forth that motion then, that the city adopt a land acknowledgement, read it at every city event, and also, how would you word that, Jody? Like,
they're public to city public events.
Yeah, and address the calls to action that apply to municipal government.
How do you feel about that motion, Anna?
I think that sounds good. I mean, can we put it in a timely manner, or urgent or immediate?
Yeah, did you have a timeline in your wording, Jody, or in mind?
Well, my thought is that we bring it up at the next council meeting to have a discussion about it, and then that motion would then move forward from there. But yes, as soon as possible should have been done yesterday. So, you know.
Yeah. Bonnie?
I think it's been way over a year since Jody brought it forth. I think it was you that brought it forth, wasn't it, Jody?
Well, actually, Kathy brought it forth the previous term. Like, this was before I was on council. It was brought forward, and I did ask about it again as soon as I got on council, and I was told, well, we already looked at that and we can't do it. So,
yeah.
Now it's the time to re-look at how we can do it. And if we can't acknowledge specific nations, then we should do something a little more general, but we should still do it.
Did they mean that as a council we couldn't do it, Jody? Like, businesses and other groups can do it, but as the municipality?
Well, they were saying they didn't, because the various First Nations around us hadn't quite agreed as to who should be acknowledged, that they didn't want to upset somebody by excluding them or including a group that shouldn't be included. So, you know, when it comes to municipal government, like, we're sort of, it's putting an official stance on something that maybe hasn't been quite decided amongst First Nations people themselves. So my solution to that would be, let's just make it a little more general, so that it avoids any, you know, hard feelings or whatever, and that it can be adjusted as we learn things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the festival has one and
Yeah.
these groups.
Oh, a lot of people have them. I
Okay.
use them at the another board that I was on. I read it every board meeting. So
Yeah.
Well, there are acknowledgements. I was at the Perth Museum today, and there are acknowledgements in their signage, and they mention specific peoples, but it can be general. I did send Tatiana the one that we wrote, which Sammy had taken to the talking circle to have it vetted. So, I mean, there's so much information and so many examples to follow. There's no excuse. Anyway, we do have a motion, do we?
Yes, and typically we vote on those. Not like the last time. Bonnie, I saw your hand up briefly. Did you still have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it has to be in consultation and input from the First Nations. It can't be,
Just us.
that's, yeah. I find that when other groups and other agencies have land acknowledgements that have been vetted, that the city municipally can't come up with one because they can't decide whose land it is. I find that interesting.
Interesting is one word. Bonnie with a B.
Well, I just wonder if we make the motion that we ask city council to adopt what Anna made up,
Oh.
or do we feel that we need?
I think it would have to go with consultation
Okay,
with
with the
First Nations. Yeah, I don't think that they would just adopt something that they hadn't done research on first. So
Can we reach out to the First Nations?
Well, I understand from what Anne Cardbert said to me that she had heard that there was a consultation at some time with representatives of various groups and they couldn't agree with the city, I guess.
that was what we heard from staff.
Yeah, but it can be general. The point is to make the statement. And I think the truth and reconciliation calls to action are a really important part of it, of our recommendation.
Okay, so it's Sammy. Did you have a question about this?
No, I just was gonna say if you wanted to vet it, you could always, the Talking Circle is an up and coming group. It's recently started. If they wanted to vet it, they also meet. It was just a suggestion if council wanted to send it somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Okay, so the motion on the table is the city needs a land acknowledgement ASAP and needs to read that land acknowledgement prior to any city meeting, right?
Or
and that the city examine the action items related to municipalities that are listed in the Truth and Reconciliation. Calls to action, yeah. Okay, so that's the motion Anna has put forth. Do I have a seconder? Sam, is that your hand up to second? Okay. All in favor? Okay, that is passed.
Does everybody know, I just wanted that there's a vigil, I think tomorrow night at 8 at City Hall, a candlelight vigil?
Yeah, there is one, but I think they're not really allowed to invite people to go in person just because of the COVID restrictions. So
it's more virtual.
They're live streaming it on Facebook if you want to watch it.
Yeah,
and attend.
The Multicultural Association is organizing that.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure. Jeff, I think, was trying to say something, but I think your volume's down or something.
Oh, yeah. Nobody can hear me lately. I don't know why.
We can now.
But I was just wondering for information. The Talking Circle, do they still meet? Is it Wednesday or Tuesday afternoons at the local?
It's Wednesdays afternoon at 7 p.m. They're
Wednesday.
doing, they're not in person
Oh.
right now. It's virtual right now.
Okay.
I can send that poster along to Casey and then it can be distributed to everybody.
Awesome. Okay, any other items under new business? No, okay. So our upcoming events, Tuesday, the invasive species webinar. Please share, please attend. Ask your invasive species questions. We have Jay who's joining us from Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. And the sense I get from him is that he's more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So he just said we can cover whatever they want. So let's take him up on that. Our next meeting is not until September 2nd. So if we need anything in the meantime, we'll send out an email. Think about some of the things we want to accomplish with the remainder of 2021. And anything else I should say? I really hope in September that we can meet in person. That would be really nice. Yeah. I don't even think we've met everyone in person. No. Oh, weird. Okay, so without anything else, I guess we need a motion to adjourn, right? I remember that part.
Have a good summer, everyone.
Yeah, I saw Jody's hand up. All in favor, seconder? All right.